I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 9595, the FIT Procurement Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 9595, the FIT Procurement Act, a bill to require the Office of Government Ethics to improve federal technology procurement and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 9595 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. The FIT Procurement Act streamlines the procurement process for small businesses and small transactions and will enable the government to take full advantage of commercial best practices. This legislation achieves this in 3 ways. First, by increasing the micro purchase threshold, or the MPT, from $10,000 to $25,000. Second, by increasing the simplified acquisition threshold, or the SAT, from $250,000 to $500,000. And third, by authorizing advance payments for certain types of software and cloud computing. On the first, I would note that purchases under the MPT, which currently account for a tiny fraction of overall government contract spending, do not require the involvement of a federal contracting officer. For this reason, raising the MPT from $10,000 to $25,000 is estimated by George Mason's Center for Government Contracting to save more than $40 million annually in federal administrative costs. This allows contracting officers to spend more time on larger acquisitions where the potential for waste, fraud, and abuse is far greater. Further, purchases under the MPT and below the SAT are subject to simplified procedures in order to reduce administrative costs and promote opportunities for small businesses. By increasing the SAT from $250,000 to $500,000, this bill provides opportunities for small businesses and reduces administrative burden for smaller government contracts. Finally, by allowing for advance payments for software services, this bill saves taxpayer dollars by allowing federal agencies to access discounts that are only available through upfront payments. I want to thank Representative Burlison for his leadership on the House companion of this important legislation. I urge my colleagues to support this important government efficiency reform legislation. I now yield to Ranking Member Raskin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The FIT Procurement Act will streamline and simplify federal procurement to help agencies acquire commercial technology in a more timely way and make it easier for businesses to compete for contracts. It would require the Federal Acquisition Institute to create a cross-functional information and communications technology acquisition training program for people tasked with acquiring information and communications technology. It would also increase the simplified acquisition threshold from $250,000 to $500,000 and also increase the micro purchase threshold from $10,000 to $25,000. These changes would save money by decreasing the amount of time contracting officials spend on these contracts. The bill would also required the Chief Acquisition Officers Council to identify and eliminate specific unnecessary procedural barriers that disproportionately affect the ability of small businesses to compete for federal contracts, with a focus on streamlining documentation and qualification requirements unrelated to the protection of privacy and civil liberties and related matters. I support the bill. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Burlison from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, H.R. 9595, the FIT Procurement Act, would improve federal procurement by deploying a number of reforms aimed at reducing administrative burden and training the acquisition workforce. The reforms in this bill would streamline and simplify the federal procurement process and ultimately save taxpayer dollars by reducing agency acquisition costs. This bill requires the Director of Federal Acquisition Institute to develop and implement cross-functional information and communications technology training for the acquisition workforce, which is key. Having worked in the private sector in software procurement, the software is only as good as the folks are that are trained to use it. This training will support those responsible for purchasing ICT for the federal government and ensure that they have the latest information about how to best select and purchase this technology. This bill significantly increases the number of purchases by the federal government that use commercial best practices. Specifically, the bill increases the simplified acquisition threshold from $250,000 to $500,000, and the micro purchase threshold from $10,000 to $25,000. Purchases under the micro purchase threshold are the closest the federal government gets to following commercial buying practices because they do not require the involvement of a federal contracting officer. Raising the MPT to $25,000 is estimated to save $40 million annually in administrative costs. 23% of the federal government's open market transactions occur between $10,000 and $25,000, but these transactions actually only account for about 1% of the total spend. So increasing the MPT to $25,000 allows contracting officers to spend more time on larger acquisitions where the potential is greater for waste, fraud, and abuse. Purchases above the MPT and below the SAT are subject to simplified procedures in order to reduce administrative costs and promote opportunities for small businesses. By increasing the SAT to $500,000, this bill improves the economic efficiency for small businesses and reduces administrative burden for smaller government contracts. This bill also requires the Administrator for Federal Procurement Policy to issue guidance on how agencies can increase competition by broadening the way they consider past performance. This bill will save taxpayer dollars by reducing administrative purchasing costs and allowing contracting officers to spend more time focused on the larger projects. The bill also authorizes advanced payments for cloud computing services. For the private sector, cloud computing providers often provide discounts for upfront payment, and this bill will allow that. This bill saves taxpayer dollars by allowing the federal agencies to access the same discounts by paying up front. I'd like to thank Senator Gary Peters and Senator Ted Cruz for championing this bill in the Senate, and I thank the chairman and his staff for working with me on this bill and bringing it to the committee for markup. And I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now unfavorably reporting H.R. 9595 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be